The silence in that kitchen was so thick, you could almost feel it pressing against your skin. Jessica, my daughter, stood across the island. Her manicured finger pointed straight at me as if I were a stranger trespassing in her home. The irony was sharp enough to taste. This was my kitchen. These walls, these counters, these floors. I built them with my own 2 hands long before she ever learned to walk. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling but not with fear, with entitlement. "Either you pay your share of the rent, $2,000 a month, or you move out." Her husband, Tom, leaned casually against the countertop, his designer watch glinting under the fluorescent light. I could tell from the smug curl of his lips that this little performance had been rehearsed. The spreadsheets, the numbers, the neat justification of greed disguised as fairness. It all had his fingerprints on it. "It's simple, Frank," he said smoothly, sliding a paper across the counter. "Property tax, insurance, utilities, comes out to just over $6,000 a month. We're a family of 3. You're 1 person. Your fair share is $2,000. Fair?" I repeated quietly, the word twisting in my mouth like something rotten. This house hadn't had a mortgage in 15 years. My wife, Carol, and I burned the final papers together in the backyard, holding hands under the Texas sky. She called this place our fortress. And now her daughter stood in the ruins of it, charging me rent for my own memories. Jessica crossed her arms, eyes cold and distant. "We've been covering everything, Dad. Groceries, bills, streaming services. You're living here for free while we work our butts off." I wanted to laugh. Their groceries were bottles of imported wine and avocado dips that cost more than my monthly phone bill. Their bills were subscriptions to apps I couldn't even pronounce. They'd moved in 6 months after Carol died. Said they wanted to help me. "So you're not alone, Dad." It started small. Scented candles replacing Carol's beeswax ones, Tom's golf clubs cluttering the hall closet, new curtains that didn't match anything she had loved. Then one morning, they repainted the living room gray, cold, lifeless, sterile, without asking. Last month, they moved upstairs into the master bedroom, Carol's bedroom, claiming they wanted to give me easier access to the ground floor. I'd been sleeping in the guest room ever since, surrounded by boxes of their unused wedding china. Now this. I looked at Jessica, really looked at her. I didn't see my daughter anymore. I saw a stranger wearing her face. Somewhere along the line, the girl who used to sit on my shoulders to watch fireworks had turned into someone who thought she could evict me from my own life. "This is my house, Jess," I said softly. Her eyes hardened. "Not anymore. If you can't contribute, maybe it's time you find somewhere you can afford." Tom smirked, like a man convinced the deal was done. "It's not personal, Frank. It's just math." I looked around the kitchen one last time. The antique table Carol and I had found in Fredericksburg, the little dent on the cabinet from when she dropped a jar of peaches, the smell of lemon oil she used every Sunday. I wasn't just losing a house. I was losing her all over again. I stood slowly. "Okay," I said. Tom blinked. "Okay, what?" "You're right," I replied quietly. "It's time for me to go." Their victory was instant. Tom's grin spreading like a stain, Jessica's shoulders relaxing as if the problem had solved itself. They didn't see the stillness in my hands. They didn't see the plan forming in the quiet corners of my mind. I walked to the guest room and packed my old leather suitcase, the same one Carol and I had taken on every road trip. I packed light. Jeans, flannel shirts, her old reading glasses, and a framed photo of her by the oak tree we planted together. When I closed the door behind me, I didn't look back. The sound of the lock clicking felt like punctuation, an ending. They thought they'd won. They thought I was defeated. But they didn't know one thing. The name on the deed wasn't Jessica Miller. It was Frank Miller. And before the week was over, they'd learn exactly what that meant. I walked next door to Sam Jones's place, my best friend for 30 years. He opened the door before I could knock, eyes narrowing at the suitcase in my hand. "What did the vultures do now?" he asked, wiping grease from his hands. "They're charging me rent," I said simply. Sam let out a whistle, low and sharp. "Then I guess you'll be staying here a while." The relief that washed over me wasn't joy, it was clarity. The kind that comes right before a storm. I wasn't alone. And a man who isn't alone is never truly beaten. As I sat in Sam's cluttered kitchen that night, drinking his terrible black coffee, I couldn't shake one question. Why had Tom looked so confident, like he already knew how this would end? I was about to find out. And when I did, everything changed. Sam's kitchen was the opposite of mine, messy, loud, alive. The smell of motor oil and burnt coffee hung in the air, the kind of scent that meant real work happened here. He poured me a steaming mug and slid it across the table. "You know, Frank," he said, "I've seen a lot of dumb things in my life, but charging your own father rent? That one takes the cake." I managed a tired smile. "They think they're helping. They just don't realize what they've turned into." Sam didn't answer. He just looked at me the way an old friend does when he knows you're holding something back. After a long silence, he set his mug down with a quiet thunk. "Something's been bugging me all week." Didn't want to say anything until I was sure. My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Tuesday morning, around 10. I was out back cleaning the mower when a car pulled up to your house. Brand new Lexus, all shine and apology. A guy in a suit got out, clipboard, camera, the works. Logo on the side said, Austin Property Valuations. Sound familiar? I felt my pulse quicken. "An appraiser?" Sam nodded. "Yup. And guess who came out to meet him? Tom. He walked that guy all around your property like he was selling it himself. Pointing at the roofline, the garden, even the fence we fixed last spring. Looked real official. For a long moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then it clicked. The spreadsheet, the sudden rent demand, the perfectly timed argument. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment fight. It was a setup. "They're not trying to charge me rent," I said slowly, the words cold and steady. "They're building a case to get me out for good." Sam's expression darkened. "The hell they are. Not from Carol's house." I looked down at my calloused hands. Steady, deliberate. The sadness I'd felt hours earlier burned away, leaving something harder underneath. It wasn't anger. It was purpose. "No," I said quietly. "They won't." That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay awake in Sam's spare room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles above me. Tom and Jessica's faces kept flickering through my mind. Their smug certainty, their rehearsed calm. I replayed the conversation in the kitchen, the exact phrasing of their threats, the numbers Tom had laid out. It wasn't just entitlement anymore. It was a campaign. They wanted me gone. And now I wanted something else entirely, to protect what Carol and I had built. By morning, the decision was made. I drove back to the house while they were at work. The air inside was heavy with Jessica's perfume, something floral and suffocating. It didn't smell like home anymore. I went straight to my study. The desk was still where I left it, an old oak piece I'd refinished for Carol when she decided to start keeping journals. In the back drawer, beneath a pile of old receipts, was my wallet. Tucked inside it, behind a faded photo of Carol smiling on our honeymoon, was a business card I hadn't touched in years. David Chun, attorney at law, estate and property. Carol and I had met him over a decade ago when she insisted we get our affairs in order. I'd argued that it was too soon, that we were healthy, but she just smiled that quiet, knowing smile. "Paper," she'd said, "is more honest than memory. We protect what's ours on paper, so we never have to fight for it with our hearts." She'd been right. My fingers hovered over the phone. When I finally pressed call, my hands were steady. "Law offices of David Chun," came a calm voice on the other end. "This is Frank Miller," I said. "I'm an old client, Carol Miller's husband. I need to speak with Mr. Chun." 30 seconds later, his voice came through, familiar and precise. "Frank, I was sorry to hear about Carol. She was a remarkable woman. What can I do for you?" I told him everything. The rent demand, the appraiser, the spreadsheet, the way my daughter's voice had turned from warmth to weapon. I kept my tone factual. Carol would have wanted that. When I finished, there was silence. Then the faint sound of a pen tapping against paper. "Frank," David said, I've just pulled up the county records. The deed lists you and only you as the sole owner. The mortgage was cleared 15 years ago. Your daughter has no legal claim to that property. None. She has as much right to demand rent as the mailman does. Relief hit me so hard I had to sit down. So they can't force me out? Legally? Absolutely not. But that's not their plan, is it? They're trying to make you choose to leave. That's psychological warfare, Frank. Not a legal battle. I exhaled slowly. Then how do I stop them? His voice sharpened. You don't fight them. You outmaneuver them. Quietly. Cleanly. You sell the house before they even realize it's gone. I froze. Sell it? Yes, David said. Off market. Discreetly. I'll put you in touch with someone who specializes in private listings. Her name is Maria Garcia. She can have it sold before your daughter knows what's happening. The words sank in like anchors. For the first time in months, I saw a path. A way to end this without raising my voice. All right, I said. Let's do it. I hung up the phone, the hum of silence filling the room. Outside, the wind rustled through the oak tree carol and I had planted. I didn't know it yet, but by the time those leaves fell, my house would belong to someone else, and Jessica's perfect little plan would crumble with them. The cafe David suggested was tucked away at the far end of town. A quiet little place that smelled of roasted beans and rain on pavement. The kind of spot where no one asked questions. Carol would have loved it. She had always said that honest places didn't need to shout. I arrived early as I always did. Habit from years of construction work. If you showed up on time, you were already late. I sat in the corner, where I could see the door but stay unseen. My black coffee sat untouched, steam curling into the cool air. At exactly 10, she walked in. Maria Garcia. She didn't look like the real estate agents you see plastered on billboards. All plastic smiles and designer handbags. No, Maria carried herself with quiet authority. Her dark suit was simple, her posture straight, and her eyes missed nothing. Efficiency in human form. Mr. Miller? She said, offering a firm handshake. Her voice was steady, low, and precise, the kind of voice that made you feel things were already under control. Frank, I corrected, shaking her hand. Thank you for coming. We sat. She placed a slim tablet on the table but didn't open it. For a few seconds, she just studied me. Then she said, David Chun explained your situation. He stressed two things, speed and discretion. I specialize in both. I nodded. He mentioned something about a pocket listing? Maria's lips twitched in a faint, knowing smile. Exactly. Think of it as a sale that doesn't exist to the outside world. No signs. No Zillow. No neighborhood gossip. Only a handful of pre-approved buyers who trust me to bring them properties no one else can touch. She leaned in slightly. You want this house gone without your daughter ever realizing it was on the market. That's doable. But it means absolute silence. Not even a hint that you're planning to sell. I can handle silence, I said. Maria finally opened her tablet. A few neat photos filled the screen, my house, taken from angles that made it look both inviting and defensible. I have a couple in mind already. Dr. Aries and Dr. Lena Thorne. They've been looking in your area for months, but keep getting outbid by cash-heavy investors. They're ready to buy immediately. No inspections, no delays. I hesitated. And what about Jessica and Tom? They're always home. I've done my homework, she said. Your daughter works at the gallery until 5 p.m., and her husband's office has those long Monday through Thursday meetings. I'll schedule one showing, exactly one, on a weekday afternoon. We'll be in and out in less than an hour. Her tone left no room for doubt. You seem to have thought of everything, I said. Maria closed the tablet. I don't make mistakes, Frank, and I don't leave paper trails. For a long moment, I just looked at her. Calm, professional, almost surgical in the way she spoke. It wasn't revenge I felt brewing, it was precision. A quiet, methodical correction of what had gone wrong. Okay, I said finally, the word heavy with meaning. Let's do it. She smiled, not wide but real. Then let's make it official. I signed the papers right there in that cafe, the pen gliding over digital ink. For the first time in months, I felt control slipping back into my hands like a well-worn hammer. "From this point on," Maria said, standing, "you stay exactly who they think you are, the tired, defeated father who gave up. Don't confront them, don't hint at anything. Let me handle the rest." As she turned to leave, she paused. "You remind me of my father," she said quietly. "He built houses too, and when he was done, he always said the same thing. Measure twice, cut once." That phrase hit deep. "That's exactly how I live," I said. "I figured," she replied, a faint smile touching her lips before she disappeared into the sunlight. I sat there long after she left, the weight of the decision pressing down and lifting me up at the same time. Selling the house wasn't betrayal, it was defense. Carol's words echoed in my mind. "You protect what's yours on paper, so you never have to fight for it with your heart." That night, I slept better than I had in months. The first move was made. The fortress was shifting. But peace never lasts long. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Jessica's name lit up the screen. I almost didn't answer. When I did, her voice came through syrup sweet, the kind of tone she used when she wanted something. "Hi, Daddy," she said. "I hope you're doing okay. Tom and I found this wonderful place for you, Willow Creek Estates. It's not a home, really. It's more like a resort for retirees. They have golf, yoga, and a heated pool." My jaw tightened. The timing was perfect, too perfect. "Jess," I said slowly, "that's very sudden." "I know," she chirped, "but there's an opening this Saturday. We already booked a private tour." Saturday, the same day Maria had planned her private showing. It hit me like a punch to the chest. They weren't just evicting me. They were relocating me, one brochure smile at a time. Saturday, 1 day, 2 tours. Mine would decide who owned the house. Hers would decide where she thought I was going. Only one of us would be right, and she was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Saturday came dressed in sunshine, the kind of clear Texas morning that made everything look cleaner than it really was. But inside me, the air was still too still. I'd woken early at Sam's place, my suitcase still tucked in the corner, my hands restless. Today wasn't just another day. Today was the day the house chose its next owner, and the day my daughter thought she was sending me to a resort. I sat at Sam's worn kitchen table, sipping the world's strongest coffee, when he came in wearing his old grease-stained overalls. "You sure about this, Frank?" he asked, squinting at me through his glasses. "Never been more sure," I said quietly. He nodded, no more questions asked. That's the kind of friendship we had, the kind built over 30 years of fixing things side by side. By 1:45, we were in position. Sam's old Ford truck was parked 3 houses down from mine, its faded blue paint blending in with the suburban scenery. I was in the passenger seat, half hidden behind a row of overgrown oleanders, watching my house through a narrow gap. Sam was outside, rake in hand, pretending to tend his lawn. He'd be my lookout, our signal system simple and silent. If he took off his hat, it meant someone turned onto the street. If he dropped the rake, it meant Jessica or Tom were home early, and I needed to vanish. At exactly 2 o'clock, a gray Volvo rolled up to the curb in front of the house. My breath caught. Maria stepped out first, every movement precise. Calm, professional, unreadable. Behind her came a couple, Dr. Aries and Dr. Lena Thorne. They were about my daughter's age, maybe a little younger. There was something different about them. They didn't move with arrogance or greed. They looked like people who built their lives carefully, not people who took shortcuts. Maria greeted them warmly, then led them up the walkway, the same walkway Carol and I had laid brick by brick 20 years ago. I could still remember the way Carol laughed when the last brick refused to fit, how she smudged dirt on my cheek and said, "Now it's perfect." As Maria unlocked the front door, the 3 of them disappeared inside. My house swallowed them whole, and I waited. 48 minutes. That's how long it took. Long enough for the sun to shift, for sweat to bead on my palms, for my heart to pound like a drum in my ears. I pictured them moving through each room. Lena running her fingers over the built-in shelves I made for Carol's birthday. Aries admiring the solid oak cabinets I built one winter when money was tight and love was plenty. Every nail, every beam, every ounce of that house held pieces of us. I wondered if they could feel it. Across the street, Sam kept raking, his movements slow and steady. No signals. Everything was going smoothly. Through the living room window, I caught a glimpse of them. Maria standing by the fireplace, the thorns examining the mantel I'd carved from a single piece of reclaimed wood. Lena smiled, pointing at something. Aries nodded. They weren't just admiring square footage. They were seeing care. That gave me hope. Then, after what felt like a lifetime, the front door opened. Maria stepped out first, calm as ever, followed by the thorns. They stood on the porch talking, the kind of animated conversation people have when something feels right. A minute later, they shook hands. The thorns got into their car and drove off. Maria stayed behind, tapping something into her phone. My phone buzzed a few seconds later. I answered on the first ring. "Frank," Maria said, her voice level but humming with quiet satisfaction. "They loved it." My chest loosened. They did. Lena couldn't stop talking about the bookshelves. Aries said the woodwork reminded him of his grandfather's cabin. They feel the house. That's rare. I exhaled, relief flooding through me. So, they'll think about it? A small pause. Then, "No, Frank. They already made an offer. All cash. 940,000. They want to waive inspection and close in 10 days. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. 940, I repeated. "That's right," she said. "And they mean it. They don't want to risk losing the house." I leaned back in the seat, eyes fixed on the home I'd built. The sunset was catching the roofline, painting it gold. It wasn't a prison anymore. It was the key to my freedom. "They can have it," I said finally, my voice steady. "We accept the offer." "Good," Maria said. "I'll draw up the purchase agreement tonight. Once the trust paperwork is ready, they'll never be able to touch a cent. By the time your daughter realizes what's happening, it'll be done." I looked out the window one last time. "Thank you, Maria." "You don't owe me thanks," she said softly. "Just keep quiet. Let them think they've won. The quieter you are, the louder their downfall will sound." The call ended. Sam looked up from his raking, meeting my eyes. I gave him a small nod. He grinned, one of those quiet, knowing grins that said, "Checkmate's coming." I started the truck. The old engine growled to life. I wasn't running anymore. I was building a new fortress, one Carol would have been proud of. As the truck rolled away, my phone buzzed again. Jessica. Her name flashing on the screen. I didn't know it yet, but that call wasn't about love or concern. It was the first warning shot of a battle she didn't even know she'd already lost. The next morning started quiet, too quiet. The kind of stillness that feels like the pause between lightning and thunder. I was sitting on Sam's porch, coffee in hand, watching a hummingbird flit between the hydrangeas, when my phone buzzed. Jessica's name flashed across the screen. I almost let it ring out, but curiosity, and a strange kind of satisfaction, made me swipe to answer. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, the tone she used when she wanted something. "How are you holding up?" I smiled faintly. "I'm managing, Jess." "Oh, good," she chirped, "because Tom and I found something amazing for you. It's called Willow Creek Estates. It's not what you think. It's more like a retirement resort. There's a golf course, a spa, even a little bistro that does happy hour." I could practically hear the smile on her face. I didn't say anything. I just listened. She kept talking, painting her gilded cage with warm, honeyed words. "They have art classes and fitness programs. You'll love it there, Dad. It's perfect for someone your age. And the best part? I already booked us a private tour this Saturday." My grip on the phone tightened. Saturday, the same day Maria had scheduled the private showing. "That's very sudden," I said slowly. "I know, but these places have waiting lists," she replied. "A corner unit just opened up, and I didn't want you to miss your chance." Her voice softened into something almost rehearsed. "We just want you to be comfortable, Dad. You've done so much for us. Let us take care of you now." I let the silence stretch until it started to tremble. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I said finally. Of course, she said, cheerful and oblivious. It's the least we can do. The least, I thought bitterly, is exactly what she was offering. When the call ended, I sat back in the rocking chair. The sun was warm, the sky clear, the world deceptively peaceful. But inside, I could feel the quiet machinery of my plan turning, precise, unstoppable. They thought they were building my new life, when in truth I was dismantling theirs. By Thursday, the sale paperwork was in motion. Maria called to confirm everything. The Thorns have wired the earnest money, she said. The title transfer will be ready by Monday. Once it's finalized, the Carol Miller Trust will hold the funds. You'll be the only lifetime beneficiary. They won't be able to touch a cent. The Carol Miller Trust, I repeated softly. Just saying her name out loud made my chest ache. But in a good way. She'd like that. She'd love it, Maria said gently. That night, I walked back to my old house under cover of darkness. From the street, it looked peaceful. The lights were on in the living room. Laughter floated faintly through the walls. Jessica and Tom were inside, likely pouring expensive wine and celebrating a victory they didn't know they hadn't won. I stood there for a long time, watching the glow through the window. That house had once been my fortress. Now it was their illusion. And by this time next week, it would be someone else's home entirely. Sam's voice broke through my thoughts. You sure you're ready for this, Frank? I turned to him, nodding. They stopped being family when they stopped being decent. He grunted softly. Just remember, revenge is like wood glue. You use too much, it gets messy. I smiled faintly. This isn't revenge, Sam. It's balance. Friday afternoon, Maria sent a final text. Documents ready. Closing Monday 9 a.m. Be there 15 minutes early. I texted back a single word. Done. Then, as if fate couldn't resist adding a final touch of irony, Jessica called again. Hey, Dad, she said brightly. Don't forget. Tomorrow's the tour. They even offered to give you a complimentary spa session after. A spa session. The woman who had evicted her own father was offering him a foot massage. Sure, Jess, I said, keeping my voice light. Wouldn't miss it. Great, she replied. Tom will pick you up at 10. It's going to be a fun day. I hung up, staring at the dark screen. I could almost hear Carol's laughter in my head. That soft, knowing laugh she had when people thought they were clever. Saturday morning came like a test of nerves. Sam dropped me off at the coffee shop near the estate, pretending it was the start of my tour. At 2 o'clock, Maria would be back at the house, conducting her final showing and securing the deal. As I sat there, watching the sunlight catch the dust motes in the air, I thought of something Carol once told me. Kindness without boundaries is just an invitation to be used. She'd been right about that too, because by this time next week, the people who tried to charge me rent in my own home would be holding an eviction notice, one signed by the man they'd underestimated the most. I didn't know it yet, but before the ink even dried on the sale, I'd uncover one last secret. Something buried deep in old papers that would turn quiet justice into something far sharper. Something that would make even Tom's smirk finally disappear. The morning after the showing, I woke up in Sam's spare room to the smell of coffee and the sound of birds outside his window. For the first time in years, my mind was still. The hardest part was over. The house was as good as sold. The trust was being finalized. And Jessica and Tom were blissfully unaware they were standing on borrowed ground. But peace never lasts long for men like me. Not when the past still hides in boxes you've avoided opening. That afternoon, I decided to sort through the last of my paperwork. A stack of old files I'd taken from the house before leaving. I laid everything out on the bed. Tax forms, car titles, old insurance papers. Years of life reduced to labeled folders. Then, tucked at the very bottom, I found something I didn't recognize. A thin, dust-covered file marked in Carol's careful handwriting. Emergency card. Took me a moment to remember. Years ago, when Jessica had left for college, we'd opened a joint credit card in her name. For emergencies only, Carol had said. If she ever gets stuck, she'll have something to fall back on. We'd agreed to keep it active until she was stable, but after she married Tom, I'd assumed it was long closed. Curiosity tugged at me. Inside the folder was a single unopened envelope, one of those corporate statements you'd normally toss without reading. It was dated just last month. I hesitated for a second, then tore it open. The number at the bottom of the page made my chest tighten. $12,487.19. I blinked. That had to be wrong. The card was supposed to be inactive. Then I looked closer, scanning the list of recent transactions, and felt my stomach turn. $450, La Beau Bistro $800, Atelier Boutique $600, Serenity Spa and Resort $279, Uber Premier $135, the Roast Room Cafe. None of it was an emergency. It was a lifestyle, one that I'd been paying for without knowing it. My hands trembled as I dug deeper through the file. There were older statements, too. Dozens of them. Different dates. Different cities. But always the same pattern: dinners, spas, luxury stores. Each month, more charges, more lies. I flipped through one after another until I found one dated about 6 months back. Right around the time Jessica had sat in my kitchen, tears in her eyes, telling me they couldn't afford to fix their car. I'd pulled $500 in cash from my savings that same day to help them out. And there it was, dated 2 days later. Serenity Spa, $375. The air in my lungs vanished. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was theft. A long-term, carefully disguised betrayal. They'd been using the emergency card for years, living lavishly behind my back, and every month I'd unknowingly covered it, because the account was still tied to my name. The sadness I'd carried for weeks hardened into something else. Something sharper. I didn't rage. I didn't shout. I just sat there, methodically lining up each bill across the bed like evidence. Because that's what it was now, evidence. After a few minutes, I picked up my phone and started taking photos. Every page, every charge. Dozens of images. Then I opened my email and attached them all to a message addressed to David Chun. Subject: additional documentation. Body: David, it seems the problem is bigger than we thought. When I hit send, I didn't feel triumph. I felt something colder, like setting the final brick in a wall that no one could climb. But I wasn't done. Some actions you don't delegate to lawyers. Some things you do yourself. I picked up the most recent statement and dialed the number on the back. The robotic voice that answered tried to drown me in menu options, but I pressed 0 again and again until a human finally picked up. "Thank you for calling. This is Brenda. How may I help you today?" "Hello, Brenda," I said evenly. "My name is Frank Miller. I need to report a series of unauthorized charges on my account and place an immediate freeze on all cards associated with it." "Of course, sir. May I verify your address and the last 4 of your social security number?" I did. She paused to type. "Can you tell me the date of the last authorized charge?" she asked. I glanced at the list of transactions, a bitter smile touching my lips. "The last legitimate charge on this account," I said, "was a college textbook for my daughter. Fall semester, 2010. There was silence on the other end, the kind that says someone's realizing they're part of a bigger story than they expected. "I see," she said quietly. "We'll freeze the account immediately. The secondary cardholder will no longer have access." "Thank you," I said, and hung up. That was it. One quiet call. No shouting, no confrontation. Just a clean cut. I looked out the window. Across the yard, Jessica's kitchen light was on. Through the curtain, I could see her silhouette, phone in hand, laughing about something. She had no idea her next swipe would meet a declined message. The power dynamic had just shifted, and she didn't even know it yet. I turned toward Sam's wall calendar. Monday, closing day. Tuesday, possession transfer. In 6 days, they'd wake up to find out that their world didn't belong to them anymore. And by then, it wouldn't just be their roof that was gone. It would be every safety net they thought I'd never cut. As I shut off the lamp that night, I felt something new. Not anger, not sorrow, but anticipation. Because the house wasn't the only thing I was taking back. Their lies had just written their eviction notice in ink, and I was the one holding the pen. Monday came like the calm before a long-awaited storm. The kind of calm you only recognize when you know what's about to break. I stood in front of the mirror in Sam's spare room, adjusting the collar of my best shirt. Not fancy, but clean, pressed, and quiet. The kind of shirt you wear when you're ready to finish something that's been a long time coming. By 8:45, I was downtown, sitting across from David Chun in a sleek glass conference room that smelled faintly of paper and old air conditioning. Beside us sat Dr. Aries and Dr. Lena Thorne, the new owners of my life's work. Across the table, a notary named Susan stacked neat piles of documents like a dealer preparing the final hand in a game no one else knew I'd already won. "Mr. Miller," she said with a polite nod. "We'll start with the deed transfer." She slid the paper toward me. The top corner bore the address that had defined almost 4 decades of my life. 124 Willow Lane. I picked up the pen. Felt heavier than any hammer I'd ever held. For a second, I saw Carol, barefoot in the garden, her hands covered in soil, laughing at something I'd said. I remembered the day we burned the mortgage papers, the way she whispered, "Now it's really ours." And now it wasn't. But it wasn't theirs either. Not Jessica's. Not Tom's. It would belong to someone who would treat it with respect. People who saw beauty in woodwork, not dollar signs in inheritance. I signed my name slowly, clearly. Frank Miller. The ink was thick and dark. A final, silent declaration. Dr. Thorne signed next. We exchanged a look across the table. 2 men who understood craftsmanship and quiet pride. "We'll take good care of it," he said simply. "I know you will," I replied. The notary stamped the final page with a solid thud. And just like that, it was done. No shouting. No courtroom drama. No last-minute pleas. Just the soft hiss of a pen and the low echo of a rubber seal. The sounds of victory in its purest form. When I stepped outside into the morning sunlight, the city felt cleaner. Lighter. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in years it didn't hurt to exhale. The house was gone. The past was safe. And my daughter's plan, the one built on arrogance and spreadsheets, had just crumbled to dust. Tuesday morning arrived bright and deceptively beautiful. At exactly 9 a.m., a Travis County Sheriff's car pulled up to 124 Willow Lane. No lights, no sirens, just quiet, deliberate authority. Behind it came a silver sedan, Sterling Property Management, representing the new owners. Sam was on his porch across the street, pretending to read his newspaper but watching every second. Jessica opened the door with a coffee mug in her hand, wearing that same smug half-smile she'd had the day she evicted me. Tom appeared behind her, shirt untucked, already annoyed by the interruption. "Can I help you?" Jessica asked, her tone sharp. The deputy, tall and steady, held a clipboard. "Are you Jessica Miller?" "Yes," she said, frowning. "Ma'am," the woman beside him said, stepping forward. "I'm Sarah Jenkins from Sterling Property Management. We represent the new owners of this property." Sam said later that Jessica's face changed in an instant, confusion melting into disbelief. "New owners?" she repeated. "There must be a mistake. This is my father's house." The woman opened her folder, her tone professional and unwavering. It was. As of yesterday, ownership was transferred to the Thorne Family Trust. The deed was recorded this morning with Travis County. "We're here to serve you a 30-day notice to vacate." Tom let out a laugh, short, brittle, desperate. "This is insane. He's an old man. He doesn't know what he's signing." The deputy's voice was calm but iron-hard. "Sir, your father-in-law was found of sound mind. The sale is legal, final, and binding." Jessica's coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the porch. The sound carried through the street like a gunshot. "No," she whispered. "He can't do this to us." "I'm afraid he already has," Ms. Jenkins replied, holding out the papers. "You have been officially served." Jessica refused to take them. Tom snatched the notice instead, his face twisted in fury. "You'll be hearing from our lawyer." Your lawyer can contact our office at the number provided, Ms. Jenkins said smoothly. You have 30 days. I suggest you use them wisely. The deputy and Ms. Jenkins turned and walked back to their cars. The street fell silent again, except for the faint sound of Jessica's breath hitching. Sam told me later that they just stood there for a full minute, staring at the paper in Tom's hand like it was written in another language. Then the shouting started, sharp, venomous, and loud enough to send the neighborhood dogs barking. But this time they weren't shouting at me. They were shouting at each other. At 3:15 that afternoon, as I sat on Sam's porch watching the sunlight spill over the fence, my phone rang. Jessica's name lit up the screen. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. What did you do? She screamed. Her voice was shrill, hysterical, cracking at the edges. There's a sheriff here. They said the house is sold. You have to fix this, Dad. Call them. Tell them there's been a mistake. I took a slow, measured breath. There's no mistake, Jess. Her voice faltered. What? It's not your home anymore. For a moment, there was nothing. Just her ragged breathing on the other end. Then came the sound of a world collapsing. She'd thrown me out of the house once, certain she'd taken everything I had. But she didn't know that day was just the start. Because this time, when I gave her the answer she deserved, it wouldn't just shatter her pride. It would end the illusion she'd built her life around. For a moment, Jessica didn't speak. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, trembling, alive. Then her voice came back, thin and cracking under the weight of disbelief. You sold it? She whispered. You actually sold my house? Your house? I repeated quietly. Funny, Jess. Last time I checked, you were trying to charge me rent in it. Dad, please, she said, the sharpness melting into panic. You don't understand. We've built our lives here. Tom's business, my art gallery. It's all connected. You can't just. I didn't just do anything. I cut in. I made a choice. The same kind you made when you stood in my kitchen and told me I didn't belong there anymore. She went quiet again. I could almost hear her trying to think, searching for a way to twist it back, to make herself the victim. Tom said it was just temporary, she said finally, desperation leaking into every word. He said if you paid your share. I laughed, not cruelly, just softly, the kind of laugh you let out when you've seen the full picture and the pieces finally make sense. Jess, I said, you tried to make me pay rent in my own house. You moved into your mother's room. You spent years running up a credit card we opened for you in college and never told me about. I know about that too, by the way. Her breath hitched audibly. Dad, how did you? Doesn't matter, I said. What matters is you made your choices. Now I've made mine. There was a sound in the background. Tom's voice, raised and angry. Give me the phone, he barked. A shuffle, and then his voice came through, thick with rage. You think this makes you some kind of hero? He snapped. You think you can humiliate us like this? I stayed calm. No, Tom. I'm not trying to humiliate you. I'm teaching you something I should have taught you years ago. Actions have rent, and you just stopped paying. He laughed bitterly. You're pathetic, old man. You think you've won? You sold your own house out of spite. You'll die alone in some cheap apartment while we rebuild everything you took from us. His words rolled off me like dust. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll sleep in peace. There was a pause, then the click of Jessica taking the phone back. Her tone changed completely, smoothed out, softened. I could almost hear the tears she was forcing into her voice. Daddy, she said quietly, I didn't mean what I said that day. I was just upset. We've all been under stress, you know? If you give us another chance, I swear we'll make it right. We'll pay you back every cent. Please. Her words were trembling glass, beautiful on the surface, sharp underneath. The same voice she used when she was 6 and wanted to avoid trouble. Only this time I wasn't the man who gave in. I let the silence stretch just long enough for her to hope. Then I said, slowly, you can sleep on the couch? Or better yet, get out. The same words. The same sentence she'd thrown at me weeks ago. Only now they carried all the weight they deserved. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Then I heard a quiet sob, the sound of a world collapsing on itself. "Dad?" she whispered. "Please." "Goodbye, Jess," I said softly. "Take care of yourself." And I hung up. The rest of the day passed in strange quiet. No fireworks, no shouting, no satisfaction, just stillness. By evening, I drove back to 124 Willow Lane one last time. The Thorns had already moved a few things in: books, paintings, a small piano near the window. I parked at the curb, staring at the home that had once been my fortress. The new owners spotted me from the porch. Dr. Thorne gave a polite wave. "Mr. Miller," he called out, "you want to come in? Take one last look before we start unpacking." I smiled faintly, shaking my head. "No need," I said. "It's yours now." He nodded, understanding. "You built something beautiful here. Then it's in the right hands," I said quietly. As I turned to leave, I looked back one final time. The setting sun was spilling gold through the kitchen window, the same light that once touched Carol's hair when she cooked Sunday dinners. I could almost hear her laugh, soft and distant, carried on the wind. I whispered, "It's safe now, Carol. They can't hurt it anymore." Then I got in my truck and drove away. That night, Sam grilled steaks out back. We sat on lawn chairs under a fading sky, the smoke rising like memories. He raised his beer toward me. "To clean hands and quiet revenge," he said. I lifted mine. "To Carol," I replied. We clinked bottles. The cicadas buzzed. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled over the horizon, promising rain. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt something close to peace. But life has a way of testing peace. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived at Sam's house with no return address. Inside it, a single photo of Carol's jewelry box, open and empty. Someone had been in the house again. And this time, the storm wasn't over. 2 weeks passed before I saw the envelope. It was a dull, cream-colored thing sitting on Sam's porch, half hidden under the morning paper. No stamps, no return address, just my name, printed in uneven block letters. Frank Miller. At first, I thought it was another stray piece of junk mail. But the handwriting stopped me cold. Something about it wasn't printed. It was traced, like someone had taken their time shaping each letter, slow and deliberate. I tore it open. Inside was a single photograph, old, grainy, clearly taken on a phone camera. My throat went dry as I stared at it. Carol's jewelry box. Open. Empty. I knew that box better than I knew my own face. Mahogany wood, carved roses, a brass hinge that squeaked when you opened it. I'd made it for her 25th birthday, every curve sanded by hand, every corner sealed with polish. When she died, I locked it in the top shelf of her old dresser. I hadn't touched it since. And now someone had. My fingers tightened around the photo. "Sam!" I called. He came out with a wrench in one hand, his brows knitting as he saw my face. "What's wrong?" I handed him the photo. He frowned. "That's from your place, ain't it?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "And unless the Thorns suddenly took up burglary, someone's been inside." He studied it for a moment, then looked at me. "You think it's them?" I didn't answer right away, but in my gut I already knew. Jessica. By afternoon, I was driving back to the neighborhood I'd sworn never to visit again. The sun was low, the air heavy with dust and memory. When I turned onto Willow Lane, the house stood there. Freshly painted shutters, a new car in the driveway, the lawn perfectly trimmed. But I saw it immediately, the side gate, unlatched. I parked half a block away and walked the rest of the distance on foot, keeping to the shade. From the sidewalk, I could see faint scuff marks near the fence post. Not deep, but fresh. Someone had come through recently, quiet but clumsy. I approached the door, hesitating. I didn't want to bother the new owners. But the thought of Carol's jewelry box, the last piece of her I'd built with my hands, burned in my chest. I rang the bell. A few seconds later, Lena Thorne opened the door. She was wearing gardening gloves and looked surprised but not alarmed. "Mr. Miller?" she said. We weren't expecting you. I'm sorry to drop in like this, I said quickly. Something's come up, and I need to ask a favor. Her expression softened. Of course. Come in. The house looked different now. Brighter, lighter, alive in a way it hadn't been for years. They'd kept the bones but changed the skin. Carol would have liked that. What's wrong? Lena asked as I followed her to the living room. I handed her the photo. That was taken here. 2 weeks ago, maybe less. I made that jewelry box myself. My wife's. It should have been in the bedroom closet. Did you move it? She frowned, taking the photo carefully. No, we haven't been upstairs much yet. The movers still haven't unpacked everything. But we did notice a few odd things when we moved in. My pulse quickened. Odd things? She nodded slowly. The back door was slightly damaged. Like someone tried to force it open. We thought it was just wear and tear. And a few drawers in the upstairs room were empty. Empty, I repeated. She nodded again. One looked like it used to hold something valuable. We didn't think much of it at the time. I stared at the photo again. The lighting, the angle, the grain. It wasn't taken in daylight. The shadows were too deep, the light too harsh. Whoever took it had been there at night. When I stepped back outside, the air felt heavier. Sam was waiting in the truck, engine idling. Well? He asked. They were in the house, I said. After the sale. He exhaled slowly. Let me guess, Jessica? Or Tom? I muttered. Maybe both. He rubbed his jaw. Think they were looking for something? Not something, I said. Everything. Carol's jewelry box wasn't just sentimental. She kept small things in there. Her wedding band, a pair of earrings, and I hesitated. And a flash drive, I said quietly. She used to back up all her personal letters and documents on it. I thought it was gone after she died. Sam's eyes narrowed. You think she hid something? Maybe not hidden, I said. But maybe she left something unfinished. And now, someone else found it first. I looked down at the photo one last time. The edges were bent. The paper smelled faintly like cigarette smoke. Tom's brand. Then what do we do? Sam asked. I looked back toward the house, its windows glowing faintly in the dying sun. We find out what's on that flash drive, I said, because whatever Carol left behind, it was important enough for someone to break back in to get it. That night, as I pinned the photo above my desk, a single truth settled deep in my bones. The house may have changed hands, but the story buried inside it hadn't ended. And somewhere out there, my daughter was holding a secret her mother had left behind. A secret that could ruin us both. I didn't sleep that night. The photo sat on the table, staring back at me like a confession that hadn't yet been spoken. Carol's jewelry box, empty. A break-in. A flash drive she'd never told me about. What had she hidden? And why had Jessica gone looking for it now after all this time? By dawn, I was sitting at Sam's kitchen table, a mug of cold coffee in one hand and my phone in the other. I scrolled through every old email Carol had ever sent me, looking for anything. A clue, a code, a line that didn't fit. Most were simple, grocery lists, notes about garden soil, recipes she wanted to try. But one message, dated 6 months before she passed, stopped me cold. Subject: if something ever happens, Frank, don't forget where we started. The roots are always deeper than the fence line. You'll know what I mean. Love, C. The roots are deeper than the fence line. I stared at those words for a long time. Then it clicked. The old oak tree. The one we planted together in our first year of marriage. It sat near the back fence. Its roots sprawling so wide they'd pushed through the concrete slab years ago. We used to bury small keepsakes beneath it for good luck. Her first sketchbook, our son's baby shoes, even our wedding time capsule. If she'd hidden something, really hidden it, that's where it would be. By noon, Sam and I were back on Willow Lane. The Thorns were out for the afternoon, and with their permission and Maria's quiet nod from afar, we stepped into the backyard. The oak stood tall, its bark rough and old, casting long shadows across the lawn. We started digging near the base, careful, slow, deliberate. The soil was dry at first, then damp. After about 10 minutes, Sam's shovel hit something that made a hollow clink. He knelt down and brushed the dirt away. A small tin box, rusted, dented, but sealed tight. I took it in my hands, heart pounding like I was opening a door I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through. Inside was a velvet pouch, a folded letter, and the flash drive. The pouch held her wedding ring. My throat tightened at the sight of it. The gold was dull, but the engraving inside was still clear. Always, no matter what. I unfolded the letter next. The handwriting was Carol's. Neat, deliberate, and painfully familiar. Frank, if you're reading this, then you found what I couldn't say out loud. I've always trusted you to take care of what matters, even when the world feels colder than it used to be. That flash drive has everything, the house papers, the insurance files, even the life policy I took out after the diagnosis. I didn't want to tell Jessica because I knew Tom would find a way to use it. You know how he is. I've seen the way he looks at the numbers, not the people behind them. Promise me one thing, don't let them sell what we built. And if they ever try, make sure they learn what it means to lose something they can't buy back. Always yours, Carol. My hands were trembling when I reached the last line. She'd known. She'd known even before she was gone. About Jessica's weakness, Tom's greed, their hunger for what they hadn't earned. And she'd left the weapon that would protect me, hidden under the same tree we'd planted for our beginnings. Frank, Sam asked softly. I showed him the letter. His eyes scanned it quickly. Then he let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned. She outsmarted them from the grave. I smiled through the ache. No, I said. She trusted me to finish what she started. We took the flash drive back to Sam's shop and plugged it into his old computer. Dozens of folders popped up, labeled, dated, meticulously organized. She'd saved everything. Property deeds, tax receipts, photographs, even digital journals. And near the bottom, one folder stood out, Jessica Private. I clicked it. Inside were scanned copies of those old credit card statements, the same ones I'd found weeks earlier, but these were years older. Carol had known. She'd documented everything Jessica had ever stolen. Every lie she'd told about being short on money. There were notes, 2 little observations from Carol herself. Frank doesn't need to know yet. She'll grow out of it. Tom is encouraging her spending. Watch him. If they ever turn on Frank, this becomes evidence. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. Every word, every line, every ounce of Carol's patience and pain, preserved like a message in a bottle. When I finally spoke, my voice was quiet. She tried to warn me, and when she couldn't, she protected me anyway. Sam nodded, eyes glinting. So what now? I ejected the drive, slipping it into my pocket. Now, I said. Now I make sure Jessica knows exactly who she underestimated. That night, I wrote a short letter and attached a single USB stick. No words of anger, no threats, just one sentence. Mom always said truth outlasts lies. Consider this your inheritance. Then I mailed it to her address, no return label. She'd open it. She'd see what her mother really thought, what she'd done. And that truth, that quiet, surgical truth, would cut deeper than anything I could have said. As I watched the envelope slide into the postbox, the world felt still again. But not peaceful. Because somewhere in that truth Carol left behind, there was more than just protection. There was a name I didn't recognize in those files, a man tied to Tom's finances. And I had a feeling the story wasn't over yet. I thought mailing that letter would end things. I thought the past would finally stay buried beneath that oak tree where it belonged. But peace, real peace, doesn't come easy for men like me. There's always borrowed time. 3 days after I sent the letter, David Chun called. His voice was calm, but I could hear that edge beneath it, the one lawyers get when they've stumbled on something that doesn't fit. Frank, he said, I've been going through the insurance and estate documents Carol left behind. The ones you uploaded from the flash drive. Something wrong. Not exactly wrong, he replied. But unusual. Did you know Carol had been making monthly transfers to a man named Robert Kellen? Small amounts, but consistent. Always labeled as consulting. I frowned. Never heard of him. David paused. According to the account details, he's listed as an independent financial advisor. But when I ran the name, no such license exists in the state of Texas. That stopped me cold. So who the hell is he? That's what I'm trying to find out, David said. But there's something else. The first payment to him happened 3 months after Jessica married Tom. My grip on the phone tightened. You think they're connected? I don't think, Frank, he said softly. I know. After we hung up, I drove straight to Sam's garage. He was under the hood of an old Chevy, wiping his hands on a rag when I told him what David had found. Robert Kellen, he repeated, rolling the name around like bad whiskey. Sounds like the kind of guy who wears too much cologne and no conscience. Yeah, I said, and I'm willing to bet he's tied to Tom. Sam grunted. You want me to make a few calls? I nodded. By sunset, he had a name. Got a buddy who runs background checks for contractors, he said. Pulled up a file. Kellen's not a financial advisor. He's a broker, unregistered, unlicensed. Used to work for a firm that got shut down for money laundering. Guess who one of his former clients was? I already knew before he said it. Tom. Sam nodded. Yep. Looks like your son-in-law was funneling money through this guy's investment group. Probably using Carol's insurance or house funds as seed cash. My jaw clenched. So Carol found out. She must have hired him herself to track the money trail. But he played both sides. Or, Sam said quietly, Tom made her hire him. That idea sank into me like cold iron. To fit. Every piece of it. Carol's hesitation in her later years, the half-finished notes in her journals, her sudden insistence that we update the trust. She'd known she was being manipulated. She just didn't live long enough to stop it. But I could. That night, I sat at my desk and wrote another email to David Chun. I attached the newest files from the flash drive, the ones marked RK, with transaction logs Carol had compiled. Subject: Follow the money. Body: Freeze every account tied to Kellen and Tom. File a fraud alert. Quietly. Within 24 hours, the reply came back short and sharp. Done. Law enforcement looped in. They'll move fast. Don't contact your daughter yet. Let the paper do the talking. 2 mornings later, I was sitting on Sam's porch when I saw the same silver sheriff's car pull up again. This time, not to 124 Willow Lane, but to the small downtown office where Tom worked. No lights, no noise, no spectacle. Just a quiet arrival, a knock, and 2 men led out in handcuffs. One of them was Tom. The other, I recognized from an online photo David sent earlier, was Robert Kellen. By noon, the news hit local radio. Authorities have detained 2 men for financial fraud involving shell accounts and falsified property transfers. I didn't need to hear more. I turned the dial off and leaned back in my chair. For the first time in months, the air felt clean again. That evening, Jessica showed up at Sam's doorstep. She looked nothing like the daughter I'd once known. Her hair was messy, her eyes hollow, and her voice cracked when she spoke. Dad, she whispered. He's been arrested. They said there were accounts in my name. I didn't know, I swear I didn't. I studied her for a long moment. Didn't know? Or didn't want to know? Tears welled up in her eyes. I thought he was helping us. He said it was a business expansion, that the house money was temporary. I stopped her with a small gesture. Jess, the house wasn't temporary. It was your mother's heart. And you let him sell it piece by piece. She looked down, silent. For the first time, I saw her not as the woman who'd betrayed me, but as the frightened little girl who'd lost her way a long time ago. After a long silence, she said, Is there any way back? I took a slow breath. Maybe, but not through money, not through comfort. You start by remembering who raised you, and what she stood for. She nodded faintly, tears streaking her face. Then she turned and left. That night, I sat alone on Sam's porch again. The wind was soft, carrying the smell of rain and old earth. I reached into my pocket and took out Carol's wedding ring, the one I'd found beneath the oak. I turned it in my hand, watching it catch the last bit of daylight. Justice hadn't been loud. It hadn't been cruel. It had just been patient, like her. I slipped the ring onto a thin chain around my neck and whispered, "It's done, Carol. It's finally done." Or so I thought, because a week later I got another letter. No name, no address, just 2 words, written in Carol's old handwriting, "Not yet." And inside it was a key. The envelope was small, thin, almost weightless, but my hands shook when I held it. I'd stared at those 2 words for nearly an hour before opening it. Not yet. It wasn't possible. Carol had been gone for years. I knew her handwriting like I knew my own heartbeat. And that looping T, the one that always leaned left, there was no mistaking it. I tore the envelope open. Inside was a single brass key. Old, tarnished, and marked with one faint engraving on the handle. CM 1984. The year we bought the house. I turned it over in my palm again and again, trying to think. I changed every lock after the sale, but this wasn't a door key. It was smaller, like something for a box. Or a drawer. And that's when I remembered. Back when Carol and I had built the house, she kept a little cedar chest in the attic. Not her jewelry box, but something older. She'd called it her hope chest, filled with things from our first years together. She told me once, laughing, that if I ever lost my way, the answer was in there. That chest had been locked since before Jessica's wedding. By noon, I was standing in the Thorns' attic with their permission. They'd heard the whole story by now, the sale, the fraud, the flash drive. Dr. Thorne had even offered to help. The air up there was dry, heavy with the smell of insulation and old wood. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering as I pulled it on. The cedar chest sat in the far corner, covered in a thin sheet of dust. The same one Carol used to drape her quilts over in winter. My hands were trembling as I knelt beside it and slid the key into the lock. For a second it resisted, then turned with a quiet, almost familiar click. Inside, neatly folded, were a few of our old photographs. Me and Carol on our wedding day, Jessica as a toddler in the garden, our first Christmas together. Beneath them, a stack of sealed envelopes tied together with a faded red ribbon. And under those, a cassette tape. The label read, "For Frank, if I'm gone." For a moment, I just sat there, frozen. The sight of her handwriting again, this time with my name, hit me harder than anything had since she passed. The Thorns helped me set up an old cassette player in their living room. I slid the tape in, pressed play, and waited. Static. Then a soft breath. And then her voice. "If you're hearing this," she said quietly, "then I didn't get to say goodbye properly." My throat closed. "You always said I was the planner," she went on. "You weren't wrong. I planned everything, except how to leave you behind." Her voice wavered, then steadied again. "By now, you've probably found the flash drive. Maybe even the letters. I know you'll understand why I did it, why I didn't tell you. I needed you to live, not fight. But if you're hearing this, it means the fight found you anyway." I felt my chest tighten. "Frank, I need you to forgive Jessica. Not because she deserves it, but because she's still ours. And because you'll never really rest if you don't. The world took pieces of us, but she's still the one thing we built together. Don't let anger finish what sickness started." There was a pause, a faint sniffle, a shaky breath. "If she ever comes back, give her the chance to be better. And if she doesn't, keep the light on anyway." Silence followed. Then the sound of her laughing softly through tears. "I'll be with you, Frank. Always. In the house, in the garden, in the places you think are empty. Just listen." Then the tape clicked to a stop. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. The Thorns quietly slipped out, leaving me alone in the fading afternoon light. Carol's voice still lingered in the air, soft, warm, unyielding. "Forgive her." The words circled in my mind like a gentle storm. That evening, I drove back to the small cottage I'd been renting. I placed the cassette on the shelf beside her wedding ring and the flash drive. 3 relics, 3 endings, 3 beginnings. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, soft, steady, alive. I stepped onto the porch, and for the first time since this all began, I didn't feel the urge to fight. I just listened. The crickets, the wind, the faint hum of the world. And somewhere in all of it, a whisper that could have been her voice. Faint but real. Home isn't a place, Frank. It's the peace you make with what's gone. The next morning, I drove out to the cemetery. I placed the cedar key at the base of her headstone, beside a small wildflower that had sprouted between the cracks. I found it all, Carol, I said softly. And I did what you asked. I forgave her. Maybe that's the only thing worth holding on to. The wind stirred, carrying the smell of rain and oak. As I turned to leave, I noticed a figure at the edge of the path. Jessica, holding a small bouquet. She looked thinner, tired, but her eyes were clear. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "He's gone, Dad. Tom's gone for good." I'm sorry. I nodded. I know. She stepped closer, eyes glassy. Mom knew, didn't she? About everything, I said. And she left us both a way back. Jessica broke down then. Quiet tears, nothing dramatic. Just release. I put a hand on her shoulder. She didn't pull away. And for the first time in a long time, we stood there not as enemies, but as what we used to be. A father and daughter standing in the shadow of a woman who'd saved them both, even after she was gone. As we walked back to the truck, the sun broke through the clouds, golden, forgiving, final. And for the first time since Carol's death, I finally felt at home.